Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Rajiv, and my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, I'm Carly, and my pronouns are she, her, and welcome to the Queer Sober Social Podcast. We're a chill social group of LGBTQIA plus folks who want to do more with their lives than just drinking.
Whether you identify as in recovery, sober curious, or just wanted to be sober while you're listening in, we're happy that you're here. And with that, let's get started.
So, the election. I just want to start off by saying that for me personally, there was a long period of time where I had the privilege of just burying my head in the sand when it came to politics and just being able to say, oh, that's not for me. Yeah, there are some awful things going on in the world, but somebody else will deal with it. That kind of passing the buck mentality. And it really wasn't truly until I got sober that there was nowhere left for me to run and hide. So I was really forced to confront things and look at them because I was sober and actually be able to do something about it. To actually take small actions and help make a change was so satisfying and gratifying. So now that I'm actually involved, I'm awake, I'm aware, and actually taking an interest in what's going on in the world, this is all fairly new for me and a topic that, I feel like we have no choice other than to discuss right now. And I just want to say first, while we're starting off, if you got through this election sober, I see you and I am so proud of you because let me tell you, that was not an easy feat. And if you didn't get through it sober, you did whatever you had to do to make it through. And I'm still proud of you, regardless, for showing up for yourself by being here and listening to us right now. Both of those are a huge, huge deal.
That's really, really important because this whole week has been just filled with anxiety, at least for me, because it wasn't necessarily just, high level anxiety the entire time, but, have you ever had like just bite size anxiety, fun size activity left over from Halloween?
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was, a lot of that basically the entire week. Thankfully, at least for me, I had a chance to just get fully engrossed in the work that I was doing. It was a pretty busy like week of really. I was doing like a lot of reviewing of communications and some stuff for work, which is great because it meant that I wasn't paying attention to the New York Times or NPR or like 538 or whatever. Even though I did definitely have that on the back of my screen pretty much every day, all day at work. It was the election overall, like it is such a big topic, and it's interesting because like we're sitting here a couple weeks after the fact, and it's still relevant, which is not something that I expected when we had originally planned this episode. There are currently still legal battles going on. There are still currently just questions going on around the results. Um, Certain news agencies have definitely called the election, so that's not surprising at all. But there's still no concession speech. There's no transition organization going on right now. So like it's still very much in the national calculus and the whole like the thing that the nation is currently paying attention to still. Um, and this is the problem is like once you stop drinking, you start talking about the things that you're not supposed to talk about. We're talking about politics. We'll probably talk about religion at some point, like all the sorts of things that you really probably don't need to be talking about unless you are good friends with the people that you're talking to. But anyway, that's kind of what I spent during the election week and the election night. Carly, how did you spend election night?
Oh, election night. So what I did was I strategically planned a virtual therapy appointment for the night of right after work. So I gave myself that time to have the time and space to feel my feelings and process them and have a safe person to kind of confide in. After that, I made a healthy dinner for myself and then was able to hop on a Zoom call with some awesome people from our sober queer community. And that Zoom was amazing because we talked about anything other than the election going on. So that was really, really helpful for me to keep my anxiety at bay just that night, which I thought was really important to have these things planned out for myself to keep it together. Little did I know that the election would not be over that night. But circling back, how was that Tuesday night, election night for you, Rajiv?
Well, for me, it was. I mean, I joined that video chat, which was nice. I made sure I hit the gym, so was focused on like not watching the TV, not having any sort of electronics in front of me for a couple hours, which is good. Then got back and I joined all you lovely people basically to just not talk about the election, which is great. I mean, we ended up having just a good group of people to talk literally everything. I think we talked about like ancient programming languages to like modern day programming. We were talking about maybe creating a commune in New Zealand, which we should definitely do. And generally, we just, didn't talk about the election, like you said. What was nice is that we actually, like, after everybody kind of dropped off, you and I pretty much had a nice chat just afterwards.
Yes, we did. And actually, that chat that we had that night really allowed me to reflect on how I was deciding to spend my time and energy in regards to the election, since it was such a sensitive time and everything felt super heightened, at least for me. And what you said actually really grounded me back into my body. You just reminded me that I have so much personal power and I'm in control of my boundaries and what I'm willing to put up with. And it really just like allowed me to come back into my body and realize like I have so much control over what media I take in, who I talk to, who I associate with, and with everybody's true colors coming out during this election about, who they really are, it allowed me to see that for the first time and really reflect on how I wanted to proceed moving forward with the election still pending and who I wanted to, keep my relationships with and spend my time and energy with. So thank you. I thank you for that, Rajiv. Truly, it was really, really helpful for me personally.
No, you're very welcome. It's because I've been struggling with all of that for well before the election as well. And I feel like it's finally gotten to a point where I'm like, all right, cool. I feel like I now have a handle on some of this stuff. And either way, like you and I are coming at this from slightly different angles, yet again. Where I'm coming at it from like quarantine was no different than the way that I was living my life from before in many ways, because I'm a pretty introverted guy. Like this is how I live. I spend a lot of time in front of the screen. Like I wasn't somebody who would want to go out all that much, even on weekends. And so for me, it was also trying to figure out like who did I want to then use my social battery with? Because for me, like spending time with other people more than just one on one, just is a little bit exhausting. And so in that same way of just figuring out who I wanted to spend time with, that was more so for me trying to figure out like I have a limited amount of energy. I work some crazy hours. Like the election's not going to be like nice and puppies and rainbows. So like, who do I want to spend my time with? Coronavirus isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Who do I really want to spend my time with for the next like 6, 8 months maybe, depending on vaccines? So I can definitely I appreciate you hearing me out in the first place, and I'm glad that's something that I said actually made some sense.
Totally. And it just makes me really appreciate the group that we have formed since the beginning of this pandemic, and just goes to show that we have a space out here that's safe for sober and queer people to assemble, to lean on each other, be open, be vulnerable about how we're doing. Like, I just needed a space where we weren't talking about the election for one night, and I was able to carve that out for myself. And it just left me in such a good spot for dealing with the next few days and how that went. So really, really set myself up for success. But it wouldn't be possible without the group.
Definitely. Speaking of the group, there's a couple of people who are in chat right now. Um, Dina says the video chat was so helpful. Hello, Dina. Um, BD Keen says yay. So hey there. And then Burning Bright John says my gym runs Fox News constantly. Uh, Mine technically does as well, but in the free weights room, we have all the TVs off, which is great. So, or at least you could turn them off. So it's nice. Hello. Either way,
Thank you to all the supporters out there. We appreciate you so much.
absolutely. Either way, like the night of, I spent a lot of time just looking at the polls after we got off because like it was a lot of not looking, not looking, not looking, and then I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to look. So I basically got on at 5:38. I was staying up until about 1 in the morning, and because at the time like Wisconsin wasn't called, Michigan wasn't called, Pennsylvania wasn't called, Georgia wasn't called, and Trump was still ahead in all of them, and I was like, what the heck is going on? Like it felt like 2016, the evening of again. I don't know if you remember or you were like following it that late, just where the polls were actually going on. It was a bit of a surprise to kind of see the map throughout the entire evening, because like we had seen the poll. I was following the polls beforehand. I was trying to figure out like what was going on, and I was in New Jersey at the time because of a project, and I was like, cool. I mean, like this is going to be an easy election. Nothing really. It's going to be pretty straightforward. And then like midnight came around, and I was like, nope, cool. Maybe just the votes are still coming in, and we're just waiting on stuff. And it's like, nope. So yeah, because like even at the time, like at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was pretty surprised that Florida had gone red because the polling had suggested that Biden had had like a pretty good chance going into the election itself. And at the time, like at 1 in the morning, it was like 51% and 49%, which to me was like shockingly different than what I'd heard because um, people were complaining about polling errors in 2016. And similarly, you're having some big polling errors here in 2020. And that kind of made me a little bit more nervous just because, like, how it really started making me ask the questions around, like, just how different is the US now as compared to, like, 2012, 2008, like, all those times. Because the elections then I mean, elections are always contentious. That's not the issue. It's like at least we have a thumb on the like the voice of the people. We can actually figure out what people are thinking a little bit. But here, I mean, it feels like we're just entering a new era of just I don't know. We're just gonna have to figure it out. And I think that's probably what I saw in a lot of people online. People were just like drinking to cope because there were I was on Reddit for a little bit, and they had like an election thread going. It was like thread number 49, and like people were playing drinking games about like how many threads there were going to be, or like which states whoever won. It was questionable to say the least in terms of how to cope.
Right? I mean, we are in the middle of a pandemic. If your mental health is not already suffering with all the changes and the collective trauma that we are going through right now at this moment, the election was enough to push people over the edge for sure. I know people were waking up in the middle of the night, having panic attacks, checking their phone to see if states had flipped, like not sleeping, not eating, like you said, drinking to cope. It was an insane amount of pressure, and it was just the uncertainty, I think, of not knowing what was going to happen and also not knowing when it was going to end either. That we were like, how long are we going to have to live like this? Is it going to be days? Is it going to be weeks? Is it going to be months? Like, what is going to happen? So really, we've just been dealing with a lot of uncertainty of the future of what the world looks like with this pandemic, and that election was just like a microcosm within that.
Sure. Yeah, it was interesting. Brian from chat is saying, from Twitch is saying, you guys had some really great strategies for stress management during this election. Do you plan on taking these strategies and applying them to future stressful situations? Um, I think the causality is a little bit backwards because, like, I think it was because of previous stressful situations that I felt like I had some tools to help manage it, um, and therefore I could just take the you know the tool belt that I had before and just kind of apply it to election night slash week slash God knows how long. Do those strategies always work? Not always. Are they foolproof? No, but definitely I think that like things like paying attention to what media you're consuming, the kinds of people you're around, how are you taking care of your own physical well-being, your own mental well-being, your own spiritual well-being, in whatever way that looks like for you. Those are the sorts of things that I think just categorically you can try to use in any sort of stressful situation, whether that's the election itself or some other thing that might pop up. Carly, what do you think like about some of that?
Yeah, I agree with you that when you get sober, you have to try different things.
Mhm.
You literally are grasping at a new way of life, and that involves doing things that you've never done before because you're about to live a life that you've never lived before. You have never lived a life where sobriety is the number one thing that is important to you. So it's going to be individualistic for each person, what's in their toolbox, what works for them. And even within the toolbox, like what you were saying, not every single thing is going to apply to every single situation, but at least you have something to go off of. At least you have positive people in your life that support you, that you can lean on if you need to. And you can reach out to different people based off of what the thing that you want to talk about is. And, having your own mental health, calming things that you do at home. You have your own rituals and your routines that keep you healthy, keep you safe. So you build that over time of being sober, and you really get to like push off from that foundation or return to that foundation when you need it the most. And in these stressful situations when the whole world is going through something, like, it is important to retreat and go inside and, really take a look at what you need the most and give it to yourself.
I think that's totally true. And I think this kind of helps bridge us into just the broader conversation around what happened the days after. Because, I mean, day one came, like we were saying, we spent the night. People didn't know what was going to happen. Day two came and went like pretty uneventfully because everybody was still counting things. Day three was a little bit more anxious for me because everybody started getting mad at Nevada because they were counting so slow. Then day four came, and finally there were some updates because that the mail-in ballots were slowly getting counted, and finally, like, here we are, like, what is it, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then like Georgia and Pennsylvania suddenly turned around pretty much overnight because you knew going in, and every day you kind of saw like the gap getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I definitely know. I was telling somebody, one of my coworkers who's actually from Atlanta, so thank you for voting. She was saying that she was trying to like figure out which way her county was going to go, which I found like super interesting because it was one of those counties that was going to make the difference. And I thought it was going to be within like 1,000 votes or something like that. That's how closely I've been following a lot of this stuff. It's just like every few hours I'll just kind of see where the vote counts for Georgia. Which, by the way, I think this is the first time in like 20 something years that a Democrat has actually won the state of Georgia during a presidential election, which is like, thank you, Georgians. Thank you, Atlanta specifically as well. It was quite a ride. I mean, it was, if I weren't an American and if I weren't living here, I would find it very entertaining, at least what was going on. But unfortunately, we're living it. And so, yeah, it's a little crazy. Brian from Twitch says since 1992. So, yeah, that's a long time, y'all.
Yeah, right. We're in it. And I agree with what you said. Like, my phone screen time went up by like 300%. I was glued to that thing. But what I will say is that when the Nevada thing was taking forever, like, the memes on the internet really were just, they jumped out. They came through for us because I saw some of the funniest stupid memes that you could just like laugh for 1 second and your mind is not on this like election. And it really, I mean, truly it helped. So thank you, memes of the world. You helped this election.
Do you remember any like off the top of your head that like you really liked?
Oh man, just like Nevada is that coworker that shows up to work late, saying that there was traffic, but is holding iced coffee. Like, yes.
Yes. And Brian from Twitch said the exact same thing. So we all know who that is. And yes, thank you, Nevada. I definitely saw, well,
And having lived in Nevada for 2 years, I mean, I had my own personal meaning to me of like, yes, there are people like that in the state. So it represents, it tracks. So
amazing,
are not
amazing. Yeah, I mean, like I saw some other stuff around. Well, it's a bit of a nerdy reference, but Cyberpunk, which is a video game that's coming out, got delayed to December, and people were joking because it's called Cyberpunk 2077. So people were joking that we're going to get that game to come out before Nevada's votes were going to come out. They were joking that the votes in Nevada would come out in 2077 before that game actually came about. So stupid things that no matter what walk of life you're coming from or what community you were a part of, somebody somewhere was making some sort of meme, and it was great. I think what really was interesting was also just how things changed on Saturday, because finally, like, people started calling the election overall because people had a sense of it, like, and it was growing and growing and growing, but until like Georgia flipped and Pennsylvania flipped, which technically they didn't flip, it was more so they just finally counted the votes. It was, just an interesting way to see how people handle both winning and also losing, because naturally this is an election with two people. One side's going to win and one side's going to lose. Either way, people celebrated surprisingly similarly. I remember I was going grocery or something like that because, one, I was afraid of riots because I mean, we live in the city of Chicago. There's been some stuff that's gone down, and it really has been like really pockets of things, and it's really not that bad. But still, like you don't want to like get tangled up in something where you don't have to. And so I was a little worried about that. But then I saw like people celebrating in the streets. People, it was like just like as if we had like some sort of street party. There were people driving down the road with their windows open, just like yelling at people, like positively yelling, if that makes any sense. It was
Cheering,
good.
cheering.
Yeah, well, I mean, sure. It wasn't quite cheering. Like it wasn't quite like a woo kind of thing. It was more like a just straight up yelling at somebody. I don't even know what they were yelling because they were like, just going right past.
Oh
I
yeah.
also went
So
grocery and I saw like people just everybody was stocking up on alcohol, which was kind of curious. I don't know if we were winning or losing, but still, like that's just something that I find interesting because people's buying habits kind of don't change no matter what happens, and people either use some sort of substance or something like that to just like cope with either losing or cope with winning. I guess I don't know. It just struck me as a little odd.
it's true though. I mean, we're socialized in society that having a good day, having a celebration day, we're toasting, we're cheersing. Having a bad day, drink your sorrows away. It'll make you feel better. You'll forget about it. Like there's excuses and reasoning behind drinking alcohol at any situation, regardless of happy, sad, whatever. It's like so ingrained to do that. Like we don't know what else to do if we're not drinking.
Speaking of things that we don't know what to do, I think we do know something about what we need to do for queer folk moving forward. Because this election, now that we potentially have a functioning government again, question marks on the Georgia runoff. So if you're from Georgia, tuning in from there, please go vote in January. You can sign up until I think the end of November or sometime in December, but definitely look up if you have to re-register if I remember correctly. So folks, if you aren't able yet registered to vote and you live in Georgia, please go do so. Please go vote in the runoffs because the reason I'm saying that we may or may not have a functioning government is also around the Senate, and those two seats are going to make it really, really close, both on the Republican side as well as the Democratic side. So, just a shout out to the folks living in Georgia, because this isn't over. And this election, even though we had like record turnout, um, it still is like just running on. Even if you don't live in Georgia and you're still interested in helping out, like you can go text banking, you can go phone banking. Just reach out to your local party affiliates, and you'll be able to help out. In my opinion, I just want votes to be out there no matter what. So I don't really care about your political leanings, but as long as you're just going out to vote and being educated about why you're voting for who, and that's the point, right? We're supposed to let the stronger ideas win. And in my opinion, I mean, I have my personal opinions, which I'm pretty sure are pretty clear based on this. But just in case, I really think that we do need to fix some of the inequalities that still exist for LGBT folk. There are still protections that don't exist in every state. There are still issues that are cropping up in different cities. Like we live in Chicago, and I know Chicago specifically has some language around um, allowing LGBT people to rent, like not be discriminated against when they're renting a place, not be discriminated against when they're actually getting hired. That doesn't exist nationwide. And that's something that I think this election at least helps shine a light on, because there's going to be just a night and day shift between the way that the LGBT community is really treated, as well as just what comes next for them.
I couldn't agree with you more. Honestly, like I was saying in the beginning, I was not into politics, but being sober and being a queer person, it leaves me no choice. This is not my favorite topic, but it is so important that we talk about it because we have a say, we have control. And yes, we won this election, okay, but we did not win the war. This is not over, people. Like, we will not stop talking about continuing to vote about these issues that are impacting us because we have power, and then we have power and knowledge of knowing what we are doing and what we are voting for matters. So this is just the beginning, and I know it feels exhausting, and that's okay. Like, we can rest, we can take our time to rebuild ourselves personally and stay sober and make sure that we are stable so that we can get back up and keep fighting, because It personally broke my heart to see people having to run to the courthouse to get married that are LGBT couples because they were nervous that under a different administration that their rights would be taken away, that their marriage would be illegitimized, not recognized because of the laws that are currently in place changing to go against LGBT people. Like we have come too far to reverse things that should be everyone's human rights. So you have to get passionate about this because this is people that you love. These are your friends, these are your family members that are in this community that deserve the same rights as everybody else. That's all we're asking for, you know? So we will get passionate about this. Like we are doing this episode for a reason to get to get the word out because this stuff is so important.
Definitely. I mean, there is no understating the fact that your individual vote makes a difference. There are some places like I said, I thought that Georgia would have been like within 1,000 votes. That's nothing. And so like if you think your vote doesn't matter, you can definitely see that we're at a current stage of the U.S. and the way that politics works right now. Every single vote does matter, and that's why I'm saying I don't care what your political leanings are. Make sure you get educated. Make sure you understand the ramifications for what you're voting for, and then go vote. And those are the three elements that I really think everybody needs to just make sure that they're doing. This is something that like some of my friends who are more politically minded may not agree with me on, but I still want just to make sure that this is something that I'm personally passionate about it, to just make sure that everybody goes out there, whether that's a presidential election, a runoff, um, a midterm election. Make sure you're thinking about down ballot candidates. So thinking about people who are running your water, like that's something that I looked up a lot here in Chicago because we're probably going to get more flooding. Like climate change is a real thing, and Chicago is probably going to get more rain. And so I want to make sure that we are actually paying attention to that stuff. Just as a side note, Brian from Twitch says that December 10th seems to be the last day for signing up for the runoff for Georgia. And Brian also says that the Equality Act is still sitting on the Senate Majority Leader's desk. Yeah. We could talk about the Senate for a very long time.
More reason to vote. But yes, okay. Turning on to a more positive note, going back to this election that just happened, there are actually a bunch of queer firsts in history that are worth celebrating. So we just wanted to talk about that for a little bit because people are saying in this election that it really brought forth a rainbow wave, which I think is funny, but it's so true. There was a record number of openly LGBTQIA plus people who ran for various positions, which is obviously amazing. And we just wanted to highlight a couple of those stats from the last elections. So a lot of people saw and heard of Sarah McBride, who won the Senate seat in Delaware, making her the first openly trans person in the Senate and also the highest ranking transgender official that there is. So that's super exciting progress, visibility, so many great things that came out of that and will continue to come out of that. Jessica Benham from Pittsburgh, who's an openly bisexual autistic woman, won state legislature seats, and it's been made a role model basically for other queer autistic individuals to show what is possible for them in their lives, that literally there are no barriers just based off of who you are, and you deserve to have the highest roles in our government and have a say. And lastly, Mondaire Jones and Richie Torres both won their races for New York City Council, making them the first openly gay Black candidates elected to Congress, with many reporters calling this win shattering the rainbow ceiling. So previously, there was nobody that was openly LGBT in these positions. So we are shattering things. And the reason that this stuff is so important, and I'm going to quote the LGBTQ Victory Fund in this, and they said, as our nation grapples with racism, police brutality, and a pandemic that disproportionately affects people of color, LGBTQ people, these are the voices that can pull us from the brink and move us towards a united and more fair society. And that is why these are groundbreaking elections to these offices to get the people in there that can help our community have a say and keep us in mind when they're making legislation so that we are treated fairly, so that we are not disproportionately discriminated against in the midst of a pandemic. So it comes down to that. When we say vote, we're talking about this.
Definitely. And that's really important to note because like the purpose of representative government is to make sure you have people that represent you, whether that's like in terms of your gender identity or your sexuality or your ethnic identity, like whatever that may be. There should be somebody at least that represents your interests at every level of government, whether that's super small, like local government or something like that, state government or national government. Somebody out there should try to at least represent your interests and what you're trying to make sure gets done within the country. And that's why, for sure, I 100% agree, Carly. Like, first of all, congratulations to all of these people for winning their elections. That is a huge achievement. Just kind of think about it, like even from 2012, when same-sex marriage was like finally legalized. Like that's a huge difference between people fighting in the Supreme Court to make that a thing to people getting elected by the will of the majority of people to actually go represent them in a state or national capacity. That's crazy. Or city council in this case for the folks in New York.
Yes. No, it is. And think of how many people were put in the closet and not allowed to be openly LGBT because they wanted to get elected. And that was their best tactic, was to not be who they truly were. So like you said, we have really come a long way, and to have these openly out people, and it just gives us so much more hope and representation. So congrats again. We're super, super happy.
Well, one thing that I wanted to shift over to, just because it happens to be yet another holiday when we're streaming, it happens to be Diwali tonight. It's the Festival of Lights. It comes from India. Just as a very quick background for those who don't know what Diwali is, it was meant to just help welcome back the king after he defeated an evil demon. And it's supposed to basically just represent a victory of good over evil. And that I find is kind of fitting. I mean, it's not perfect, because, for anybody who knows what this is, there's no 10-headed demon on an island in Sri Lanka. But, close enough, and we can at least still celebrate. And I think that that's really important, is because even though this election has definitely dragged on, even though that we have found instances where this is not as satisfying a conclusion as we wanted it to be, there's still things to celebrate. Like, we just talked about the fact that you can find, if you've listened to this, you at least have a couple coping strategies moving forward. So at the bare minimum, you can try to handle something without needing to turn to what everybody else seems to turn to. You can be happy about the fact that there are more people within government now that represent queer and LGBT plus just generally interests. You can be happy by the fact that we're still talking about this. And this is another place for you to kind of listen in and maybe just get a little bit slightly different education that you might hear from some of the other media that you might be listening to. Overall, I mean, we're just glad that you are here. We're just glad that we were able to talk about this. And really, that about wraps up today's episode. So make sure that you rate and subscribe, no matter what platform you're on, so you don't miss the next one as it comes out.
And you can find our podcast on all major platforms, and the video podcast will be on twitch.tv and YouTube for you to watch after the fact. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Chicago Queer Sober Social. And if you'd like to shoot us an email with any questions or stories you'd like us to talk about on the podcast, please reach out to us at queersobersocial@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to Queer Sober Social Podcast. And always remember,
you are queer enough.
You are sober enough.
You are enough. So thank you very much for listening. Do stick around, because we are still going to have the rest of this post-podcast. But what that was just the end of the formal podcast that you would be able to find on all your favorite podcasting platforms. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, whatever. For those who are joining us for the very first time, we stream every other Saturday. So both on YouTube and Twitch, there is a calendar to just let you know exactly which dates we're going to be streaming and recording. Or you could just take a look at the podcast date and then just kind of add 2 weeks to that, and that's when the next one should come out, plus or minus, depending on how quickly I can edit stuff. But just give us 2 minutes and we'll be right back. Hi there, everybody. Welcome
Hello,
back.
welcome to the Hey, this is the QSS podcast after show. So thanks for
What?
sticking around with us. Woo, where we have stopped recording our actual podcast, but still recording our video. So we're just here to sit back, relax, and, kind of just talk about what we just talked about, just go on things that we didn't get a chance to say, and just other things that are going on in our life today, and take any questions from anybody that is currently watching in the audience that you might want to ask us about ourselves or what we just talked about. So the floor is totally open to anything and everything right now.
Definitely. So again, thank you everybody who's in chat. You can now see that we have chat just on this side of the screen. So any chat messages that you do send will be visible to everybody, just in case. Up until now, we've just been reading it out, just because in case anybody wants to see the specific podcast on YouTube or something like that, we wanted to make sure that the chat is integrated into the podcast itself. But now it's ready to display messages, as it says right there. And it doesn't matter whether you're on YouTube or Twitch. They will relay the messages over to the other, so you'll be able to see everybody's messages.
Amazing. So one or two things, I guess, that we didn't get to really dive into too much on the podcast was, where were you election night 2016? I think is an interesting question that was brought up a bunch on social media, and it's kind of one of those things that was like such a big deal that like everybody remembers where they were. Like it's just like you can really bond over that. So you were saying that you were in New Jersey,
Yep.
and talk a little more about what you were doing up there. But for me, I was working as a manager in a restaurant, and I was closing the restaurant that night. So we had the election on all the TVs in the
Oh,
restaurant, and
no.
just was kind of like watching it like in slow motion, because I'm closing up. It's in the wee hours of the morning, and it was very surreal. And I was like, this kind of just feels like I'm in the bubble of just this restaurant. And then when I go out in the real world, things will be different. And 4 years later, things were not different than
Where
what
were
they
you?
were showed. I was at the restaurant. I'm in downtown in the Loop.
Okay, in Chicago. Got it.
Chicago, yes, I did not specify. Yeah, so I was in Chicago, and it was a somber evening. It was very quiet. I definitely was like quietly crying in the office, not wanting to believe what I was seeing to be true, not knowing the implications that it was going to have for the next 4 years for our country. I mean, I imagined the worst that I could possibly imagine at that time, and what has occurred is beyond my wildest imagination. So the fact that when Biden won this year, to be able to just like take an actual like breath of relief of what we have gone through for the past 4 years actually felt so good. Just for once to just be able to be like, okay, it's over. Like it will come to an end, because when you're in it, you don't know. It doesn't feel that way. During the election, I couldn't even let myself get down that mental path, because I was like, there's no coming back from this. If I really start to imagine like the worst that could happen, I'm going to spiral. So just like that was one of my techniques, not even going there, because it's not going to go anywhere good. So
Yeah.
uh,
I need to get better at that one.
thought stopping is what it's called.
I definitely
So
need to
yeah,
stop some thoughts. They go a little too quick for me sometimes.
yeah. Well, that's also what meditation will help you kind of get some space between yourself and the thoughts, and you can kind of like manage them that way. Anyway, that's just my plug for more tools, because I know that our listeners are looking for things, and if you're sober, you're always needing things to try that are new and make yourself feel good. So anyway, if you want to talk more about where you were and why you were there and what you were up to that night back in 2016.
Yeah, Brian from Twitch says, I didn't feel like the results were celebration worthy, rather just finally taking a breath. So kind of similar to what you were saying, Carly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
certainly feel like I'm not holding my breath anymore, which is nice. But I
yeah.
agree. I don't certainly feel relaxed or anything like that, because there's still like 2 more months.
Yeah, there's time, and we've seen from the past couple months that okay, like there's no leadership about what to do about this pandemic that is ravaging our country, and that we're having worse numbers than we had back in March when people were literally terrified. And now we've just become so desensitized that we are just okay with these numbers going out of control and there's no leadership at all when there could be leadership happening at any moment. So it's a little disheartening to say the least.
Brian says, plays Catch My Breath by Kelly Clarkson. We cannot play songs on here, in case you are aware. Twitch is like cracking down on DMCA takedowns, so any copyrighted stuff we're trying to stay far away from. But we can definitely talk about that.
Yeah, I will be playing that song after for sure.
For sure. Also, I wanted to make sure that I thanked a couple of people that have either joined since the last time we talked and or have bought something actually from us. So I wanted to put their names on screen because that's something we can do. Hooray! So thank you, Burning Bright John, for being a follower. And then also, thank you, Half Lions, for buying a mug.
That's awesome.
In case you're interested in something that has this very fancy logo on it, you can go to our merch store. If you just type !merch, the bot will actually point you to the store. Anyway, sorry, that's kind of distracting from what you wanted to talk about, Carly.
Oh, I love it. I wish I had an Alexa here who could play Kelly Clarkson for me on demand, but in the meantime, we'll chat. But yeah, go ahead. Tell us your story.
Oh, about like being in Jersey?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, beyond the fact that I was there for a project, I was in a hotel, so that was always fun. So first of all, you're not home. Second of all, you're living out of a suitcase, so there's already those fun things going on. I was also, I think, the only person at the time on my project, and it was the last project that I was going to do before I went to grad school. And so kind of like setting some context for like, I was going to be out of the workforce for 2 years, and I thought that that was the smartest thing that I could have done. Turns out it wasn't really that helpful. I mean, it was helpful, but not helpful in the sense that like suddenly the government doesn't change in 2 years. It takes longer than that. But it was still nice to just be ready to leave corporate America for a little bit of time because it is a bloodbath sometimes. Anyway, I was also like actually seeing someone at the time, and I honestly think that I didn't react strongly enough, and so therefore that contributed to us breaking up.
No way.
No, legitimately, I thought, okay, so I was hopeful that the wheels of government turned slow, and therefore there was a lot of checks and balances, and therefore you didn't have to worry about things too much. This person that I was seeing thought otherwise and thought it was kind of like the end of the republic and like I should have been a little bit more, effusive about my anger. And I don't know, I just didn't see it that way at the time. I mean, obviously they were right in a lot of ways, but maybe I was just too, optimistic about what was going on that evening, and or repressing as much as possible what the possibilities were. But yeah, it was a lot of fun that election week for me, just because of like work stuff, life stuff, like everything was just kind of crashing down and changing so quickly.
Yeah. It could be a little bit denial. I feel like I was definitely in denial. I didn't want to accept the reality of what was going to happen. But, somehow people are super resilient. We made it through. We made it through 4 years. And I was here again in Chicago, obviously, and over the weekend and Saturday, like I was working from home and just heard a lot of people honking outside, which I live by a busy intersection. So I was just like, oh, just the city life, like nothing out of the ordinary that every single person is like honking at each other outside. I didn't even think of anything of it at all until I checked my phone like 30 minutes later, and my group chat had blown up and everyone's texting me and trying to get a hold of me, and I was like, oh, now all the honking kind of makes sense. It was such a beautiful day out too, and so I went outside for a little bit, and just mostly, yeah, like I said, like I could breathe. I was watching like those celebration like videos online, somebody was doing like a live stream of there was like a parade going on in Vermont, and I was just like watching it and crying at home, like just tears of joy or just like pure relief, like uh we're gonna be okay. Like I felt like a resurgence of hope and humanity again that I had not felt since who knows when. So and then later too, I mean, people were celebrating until midnight on that Saturday night. I came back home after going to dinner, and my neighbor was on their front porch, which faces the street, and they had a cowbell, and we were just like going hard on the cowbell and getting people that were like walking by or people that had their windows open just to cheer with us. And that was really fun. Like we haven't had anything to celebrate for so long, especially now with everybody like just being on lockdown with the pandemic. Like it just
Mhm.
felt nice to like collectively have something positive happen to us.
Yeah.
And we made it happen. So it was just it was unlike anything else that's happened in
Definitely.
2020.
I mean, it was such a stark contrast to what 2016 was, and like we were just telling our stories, and I'm like, there's a lot of doom and gloom in them, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I kind of also am a little curious about just how those who voted the other way, like, might have felt on both of these days, and was it actually the opposite, or was it more so just like, I don't know. Like, I haven't actually found people who in good faith actually voted like knowing fully well the ramifications of why they were voting for what they did. I haven't had a chance to talk to anybody, so if you happen to be in chat or you happen to like find us somehow or other, like feel free to let us know. I'm just more curious than anything else, um, and just because there is still the other half of the U.S. that's out there,
Yeah.
and even though our experiences were a little bit similar, I don't think that would necessarily be the case for everybody.
So that was kind of the other thing for me too. It's like, okay, yes, we won, but why was it so close? Like that was alarming. How are more people voting for this to continue than in 2016? Like you've seen the resume of what's happening. You are seeing actively people hurting, people being mistreated, like, and you're like, yeah, this is fine. Sign me up for more of this. Like it is wild. And I think that for me was like, okay, I can breathe for a day, a minute, just take a moment to be like, okay, we are trying to get the control back in order here to some kind of normalcy. But like half of America believes things that are indisputable in my mind. And it's crazy that like we just have so much more work to do. And that's kind of how I left feeling the weekend. I was like, okay, I'm happy, I can breathe, but we have so much work to do.
We definitely do. Brian from Twitch says it's a win, yes, but it feels like putting a band-aid on a really big wound. And that's true. I mean, like, there's a reason that the message also resonated from like the more, I mean, to use political science terminology, a more populist type of message. Like, there are actual problems that are not solved yet, that we needed to go figure out, like automation and like outsourcing of work. Like, those are real things. Moving away from certain types of industries that certain states or certain parts of the country actually like focused on. None of that has
Yeah.
really been completely fixed. And no matter what party you support, or whether you grew up with one and you're just kind of following it a little bit like without thinking or not, there's still problems to fix. And so I can kind of see like why there's like a group out there that might feel like going outside of um, going towards what they grew up with might make more sense. Um, but I don't know. I still encourage everybody to just kind of actually dig a little bit deeper into like why is it that you believe the things that you do. That's just more of like a personal thing, because there are way too many people that I think you just kind of like blindly walk forward and just kind of do something for no reason. Honestly, and I've seen that on every political spectrum that you've ever seen. Like it's everywhere, where people are just kind of blindly saying, "Yep, this is the right person." I looked at none of their policies. I looked at none of their voting records, and yes, it is extra work. But there are like more publications out there nowadays, and you have the internet, so like you can try to find just even a very quick search on like who this person is or what they're actually voting for, or the thing that you think is really important, what are both sides actually saying, and do you actually believe it? For example, like in Illinois, we had something like the fair tax law that was up for vote this time, and I don't know, like I mean, personally, I read the actual like proposal, and I felt it was pretty fair. It seems like the majority of people didn't, and I'm not sure if it was just because they heard taxes going up and they thought it would apply to them, or if they legitimately thought that we should have like a tiered tax structure like we do right now, or sorry, a flat tax structure like we have right now, rather than a tiered one. That's a really like really specific political note, but I mean like there's so many instances and stories like that where there's something that if you read the actual thing seems like it's something good or bad, and then people kind of vote the exact opposite. So I don't know. I just find it a little bit odd.
I agree with you. Like, just back to that like black and white thinking,
Hmm,
or like people like, because I saw ads on YouTube that were like, vote yes for that, vote no for that. And it's like there's so much like material out there, marketing out there that are trying to convince people to do certain things, or like inner circles of friends feeling pressure of like, oh, if I don't vote for this person, like, will we still be friends? It's like voting is your right to have a voice. And if you want to use your voice and know what you're doing and know, like, feel good about who you're voting for, like, you have to take the time and research and read. And like, it's not fun, but it doesn't take long, and it's not hard to do to inform yourself, and then you can feel good about making an informed decision, because when the votes do come out and things do start to change, you can feel pride in knowing that you had a say in bettering our world.
definitely. I mean, it's a sober reminder, and not to make a pun, but like just to remind people that there is stuff out there that you need to be looking at.
Yeah,
Also, elections are not a surprise because like they happen on a very regular basis. You can do some of that research ahead of time. Certainly, some things pop up like last minute. That's fine. Like that for sure will happen, and I completely understand that. But like some basic things around like, do they support LGBT plus people? Are they like a good human being? What is their voting history? Like all of that stuff is available like right now. Even for the next election that's going to happen in 21 for certain elections and 22 for midterm elections. Like
right.
you don't need to wait.
You don't. And I mean, you voted. Good job if you voted. If not, please register. Please look up how to do that. But like, yes, okay, you voted one time. Okay, that's great, but we're not done. Like, you will be voting from now on. Like, that is the standard from now on. Like, we just need to get on board with that, because and it doesn't matter the what the election is. Like, we all need to vote all the time, anytime that we're able to. We need to, because that's the only way that things are going to get done, that we're going to be able to push people into offices that support us, that look at us, that care about us, that are like us, that can really like affect change. So, I get it. It was not easy this year because there's a pandemic. There was lots of challenges. There will continue to be challenges. They will be different, but you ultimately have to exercise your right to vote. It's what you have to do to have a say in what happens. So, like Rajiv said, there's tons of public record, public information about these people. And for the judges for Illinois, I went through each one and read things that were so disturbing about these people that have never been challenged for their seats based off of things that they've done, conspiracies that they've done, and like horrible things that they have overturned or believed in, and just these things. And it's like, no, if people aren't waking up and reading this, they're going to just blindly vote these people to keep their seats, and they're never going to switch out these people for people that aren't going to vote, like, to reduce R. Kelly's sentence or something crazy that I read about a judge. I was like, how do you even work for us? Like, that's not what we need. So if these people aren't being challenged by us, the new wave of voters, like, we this is it. This is how we change the world.
Two last points, just maybe on some of this voting stuff. One is if the vote weren't important, nobody would be stopping it or like trying to change it or trying to like delegitimize it. So that's kind of already evidence that your vote matters. The second thing is, no matter where you are, you can still vote. Like I voted for the primaries in 2016 from China. Like I was living there, and you can still do it. Like no matter where you are, it just takes a little bit of extra planning. They will send you a ballot. You just need to send it back, and you can still do it. Like you can just like this year, for many states or many locations, you could do it in your pajamas. You can do it ahead of time, like whatever you want. Like that's I find voting not at the ballot, like at the booth itself, so much better because I can do my own research on my own time and just go figure it out, like over the course of a couple days or something like that. So there are other options for you. So don't just think that you absolutely have to vote in the way that you've always voted for in the past, or where you voted in the past. Just make sure you're paying attention to where you're registered and how you're able to vote. Cool.
Agreed. Yeah, that was really well said. I think we should switch over to some fun stuff now that we've been having so much serious talk on this episode of our podcast.
For sure.
It's been a serious season of the world, so it only makes sense that there is no ignoring this stuff anymore. And like that's what I was saying at the beginning of our episode. Once you're sober, like there's nowhere to run. There is nowhere to get drunk in a bar in a corner and pretend that this is not happening, because this is what's happening and you have to be awake to it. There's no other option. That's it. So, I mean, there's other options, but hopefully if you're listening to this, you are sober, you are waking up and wanting to take action and help others. So that's the way to do it, is to have these serious talks and be open and just ready to receive that information. So, to take some of the edge off of all this election stuff, I know that I invited you, Rajiv, and our whole Queer Sober group to, if they wanted to enjoy a digital drag show on Twitch, which was Even Universe themed Future Fest, and it was truly amazing. It was 3 nights. I invited Rajiv, or came on the 3rd night with me, and we watched it together. And I love drag. I think it's amazing creativity, so entertaining, and you kind of got a glimpse into, because I know you like Steven Universe and I love drag, so it was like the best of both worlds. And it was like some amazing art that you could watch. And a lot of the 2 queens that were hosting were from Chicago, so it felt like very close to home, and it was just it was great, and that really was so special and fun. And you can still watch it. The performances are still live on Twitch if you go to twitch.tv/the Miss Toto, so you can know what we're talking about.
Definitely.
Good luck.
Like, it was a lot of fun. I mean, digital drag is not something that I thought would have happened, but I'm super glad it has. Because like, so back in business school, we actually have an annual drag show that we do, that includes the entire student base. It is majority straight, as you might imagine, because the majority of business school people are straight. But they still, get into it, and it's kind of a nice intro into drag overall. So like, I am 1,000,000% on board for like creative stuff like that. I thought it was a ton of fun just to kind of watch it. It was super well done. Like, I was just kind of thinking through how the heck they had so many different videos from so many different performers, and like how they were able to manage like being able to have certain videos play after the other, and which songs were tied to which characters and stuff like that. Like, it was great. It definitely it ran the gamut of drag, as you might be aware, of just like crazy, like what the heck is going on type drag, to like stunning, amazing, like you could have never even imagined that this is another human being type drag. Like, it just super great. And thank you, Kelly, for inviting me, because it was a lot of fun. And if you happen to have a chance, you can definitely go over and watch. I think it's either recorded or something like that, like Carly was saying.
Yeah, I think the only thing is what we were talking about earlier is some of the music is copyrighted, so it might be like a silent movie performance, since you
Mm,
can only watch it with the music while it's live before they get to it and censor it. But you can still see the great, amazing makeup and costumes, and just creativity was like off the charts. Like, these queens must have like people at home that are in the video business that are like editing, producing, like it's just it's wild. I mean, to really have to pivot from having a career where you're on stage at crowded drag bars, like people eating at drag brunch, like to have to just pivot on a dime, and now you're not even like, you have no idea when the next time you're going to be in front of a live crowd is. So you have to just pull your resources and use your creativity in a new, completely different way, and they knocked it out of the park.
Definitely. Queen Julko from Twitch says, "Oh yeah, bring on that silent movie vibes."
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you have to.
Amazing.
So I know another show that you are currently watching that I just finished watching was Schitt's Creek.
Yes.
No spoilers for you,
And
since
no
we
spoilers for
decided.
anybody out there either.
No, we decided as a QSS baseline that no spoilers allowed about anything ever. That's our standard, our gold standard. We had a big debate about it. Um, but yes, I love Schitt's Creek. I started watching it only recently after I saw them sweep up at the Emmys and was like, okay, this is enough. I just watched an hour of them win every award. I need to see what this is about and why it's so good and why it's winning everything. So I started it and I didn't stop. I just watched it straight on through and it was it's great. It is such a good show. The last season is my favorite personally, and I just when it ended I needed more, and thankfully they made this like 45-minute like documentary type thing about the last season and the last episode, and that was it was good. I got the closure I needed to be at peace with it, but I've already started rewatching it again.
Wow. Um, Queen Julko
Yeah.
says, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, same. I'm also watching. I'm on season 2. Me personally, I'm on season 3, or no, the beginning of season 4, I think. So like I've slowly been catching up. Somebody talked about it with me like in July or August or something like that. It was actually one of my business school classmates, and he was just like, "This is a great show. It has a lot of like queer representation." And I was like, "Cool, let me go watch it." Dina also says, "I just finished too." Man, like it's been so good. I'm watching it for the very first time, so that's why I'm like kind of. I legitimately did not know about the show until I heard about it from my friend. And so thankfully somehow or other I've avoided the majority of spoilers, so I'm kind of going into this blind. And it's really really good. Like if you haven't had a chance to watch it, it's on Netflix. I imagine on other streaming platforms, but I'm not sure. I think it originally came from Canada or something like that as well. That's about all I know, and I'm just kind of like along for the ride.
Yeah, and what was really nice about the documentary too is like it's kind of after the fact, so they're able to show like just the outpouring of love and support from the fans and just really how they did like a little segment about the LGBTQ plus community and just how we have taken this show in as our own and um just basically like making Moira Rose like a new queer icon and just really like they it was so funny like it's just great they did it's like part of the documentary was at this bar where they were doing Night of a Thousand Moiras, and just everybody at this gay bar is just dressed up to the nines, be like as her, and it's just it was really cool. Like it made me realize like I'm just drawn to shows that have queer identities and queerness in them. So it was just like, oh, like to have the documentary like point that out that like this was like huge and important and like so many people are like now comfortable like with their families and coming out because of this show. It was like that's amazing. Like we need more shows like this.
Definitely. And I think actually what's interesting is between Steven Universe and Schitt's Creek, like those are two actually like legitimate representations of LGBTQ people. I mean, maybe not explicitly in Steven Universe, but like definitely explicitly in Schitt's Creek. And I think it's like a really nuanced, realistic viewpoint of how actual queer people live instead of, some of the stereotypes that you tend to see in a lot of media. Um, and it's a bit more diverse actually than what I've seen before as well. Certainly, I mean, space rocks and all that stuff, that's a little bit different. But with the people in Schitt's Creek, it was also just kind of interesting to see who identified as what, and the kinds of things that they were kind of talking about, and like the personality types that they had as well. It was nice to see like a mix
Yeah.
of just uh, gender representation, um, and the way that people ended up talking, because that felt more realistic to me and like more like my experiences, which is not something that I've seen a lot in the majority of queer type media that I've seen.
Right, where like the character's sexual identity is not the focal point of the
Mm-mm.
show. There's not any negative energy towards this relationship. It's a relationship, just like any other straight relationship would be viewed. And so just to have it be like, okay, and this is a fact, and everybody just takes it at that, and there's no like animosity towards them, like it's really special. I mean, it's just what reality should be, and it doesn't have to like make or break the whole like thesis of the show.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the thesis the thesis of Schitt's Creek is kind of like questionable in the first place.
Yes, yes. I know that I'm really excited for the next thing that I saw that Dan Levy is going to be in, which is this holiday movie, which I'm sure we'll definitely talk more about once it comes out. But I was super excited for this trailer for Happiest Season, and it's like a coming of age, or coming like a coming home to your parents, but like not ready to come out to them yet, and bringing your significant other, but like telling them it's like just your friend or
Hmm.
whatever, and not wanting to like be forthcoming about it. And I feel like that's super relatable for a lot of people, myself included. So I'm really looking forward to that and seeing how they like navigate telling a queer holiday Thanksgiving coming home to the family story.
Interesting. Like, I still have to watch the trailer, sorry. I know that you shared it with me, but it definitely sounds interesting because like that's definitely not an angle that we tend to hear about. Um, Even though and especially since it's like super relatable even for like the quote unquote straight community just generally. Like there are lots of times where people just bring people home and they're not like very explicit about the fact that they're dating. Um, but I mean, like generally people make a lot more assumptions when you bring somebody home. And so yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see just how they play with that idea because it definitely sounds relatable. It definitely sounds like it's a good story to tell during and close to Thanksgiving or Christmas. Um, just when everybody normally would be going back home. So like, be careful, everybody who is actually going home. The virus is still a thing, by the way.
And we'll talk about that as we want to pump out some podcast material for you all that are dealing with family stuff, whether
Hmm.
it's going to see them in person or in the past things that have happened. So we get that holidays are a super sensitive time, and especially for queer folks. So we see you. We're here for you. We've been through it, and we continue to go through it, and we're
Yep.
here to talk about it because it is reality.
Yep. Definitely. And like we said last time, like we may not be the experts, we may not be like at the end of our journeys or anything like that, but at least we're not at the beginning and we figured a couple things out. And if nothing else, we're just providing you guys a platform to chat and talk about this stuff and share your stories. Um, Again, shout out to everybody in chat already. If you have any other questions or as we're kind of continuing to talk here, feel free to just let us know. Again, your messages will show up actually that side.
Thank you to everyone that's here. Seriously, like the outpouring, like love and support that we got from our first episode, it means so much. And it just goes to show that what we're doing is important. What we're doing is being well received. And we're here to lift queer, sober voices because when I first got sober and I realized I was queer, I felt like I was the only person in the whole world that felt this way, that identified this way. And there was nothing out there for me that said you're okay just as you are, like you are more than okay, you're amazing, and like you need to nurture yourself and nurture your story, so because there's so many other people out there like you, but you wouldn't even know it because we aren't here actively talking about it and putting ourselves out there. So by doing this, we hope that we can connect and unite even more so than we already have.
Definitely. I think one of the things that was interesting is that as we're kind of uniting and trying to figure out what this overall group really means, I think you had a couple ideas for what we might want to call people or like use in the future.
Yes. So our podcast groupies, we definitely want to have like a nickname for you guys. Like, you know how like celebrities or singers and stuff have their like have their names to their fan base. Right now on Meetup for our Queer Sober social group, we call everyone unicorns, and we were trying to think if you would be open to that being called unicorns, but we also wanted to talk about like obviously there is kind of a perception of what a unicorn means, and we wanted to kind of see how we would feel about like reclaiming that and making it mean like something different to our group. So Rajiv, I know you might have a little bit of knowledge of, well, when you heard the word unicorn, what do you automatically think of?
Well, when I think of it, I generally think of typically some sort of single bisexual woman, generally, like really, really typically, who is out seeking an opposite sex couple. And that's generally what I think of most immediately, knowing fully well that that isn't the only definition of a unicorn, but that's like the image that immediately comes to mind when I hear that.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true. And people are on Tinder or dating apps or whatever and using the unicorn emoji, trying to like mean something extra, like, hey, I'm down to hang out with you and your straight boyfriend or whatever. Like, I don't know. And then there's like the whole unicorn hunting thing,
Mm.
which the couples are on these apps specifically like seeking out women or women identifying people that I think that would be open to kind of either being a third for like a one night thing or like being a throuple or like who knows? I don't know. There's so many different like people out there looking for all different things. So we're not here to judge that. But what I do want to do is reclaim if we can and if you all are open to it. Um just thinking what a unicorn actually is, and that's a mystical creature that doesn't exist. And when I first got sober and I was realizing my sexuality, and I felt like just a unique creature that like there's nobody in the world out there that is exactly like me, that has lived my life, that has my story. And so that made me feel really, really like there is nobody out there that's exactly like me. So it made me feel like I could relate to the term unicorn in a new way. Does that make sense?
It does, it does. In fact, Dina from YouTube says unicorn can mean whatever we want, and Queen Julka from Twitch says when I think of unicorns, I think of mystical creatures. Lol, 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 lol. Which absolutely. And I also understand where you're coming from, Carly, because like it definitely is really true. Like even just the idea of being queer plus sober is somehow like doesn't exist anywhere. And that in and of
Right,
itself
like
can just make you feel super, like mythical creatures.
yeah, or like super isolated of like or like why am I not like anybody else that I know or have ever known my whole life? And it's like I don't and like okay, I guess maybe like for there was a period in my time in my life where I would call that a black sheep, but I feel like that has such a negative implication to it. To turn that around and have it mean something positive, I feel like that is a unicorn because the unicorn is literally this majestic like thing that like flies around, is beautiful and is admired, and like I don't think that I've seen a unicorn like in a negative context before. So I'm happy that our current viewers are behind us in making our groupies the unicorns, and I would love to address you all as we start our next podcast like, hey unicorns, welcome back to USS podcast. So happy you're all here because we're all individual, we're all unique. There's something different about each of us, and that's like what makes our group so awesome is that none of us are the same, none of us have the same story, and just makes us that much cooler.
Definitely. And also, it makes us a more legit podcast considering this is episode number 2, not like 200 or anything like that. So we're still building things and figuring things out. So definitely. Queen Julka from Twitch says unicorn spelled Quorns. So even like alternative
Woo.
spellings and something to reclaim the same name. I mean, we're doing with queer already. So any reason we can't do it otherwise. Billy Yum Yum 2x2 from YouTube says uniqueers, queericorns. Believe me, I mean, like we've already tried that with holidays because we're having New Queer's Day, we're having Queer's Giving, Valen Queer's Day. I don't know, like something. We can pigeonhole it in. We'll make it work.
Yes. Oh, I love these ideas. That's truly amazing. And yes, Rajiv, it's super important that you just mentioned. We talked about the holidays coming up, that we are going to be talking about that on our podcast, but also in real life, if you'd like to join us virtually for Queers Giving, which will be on Black Friday, 7 p.m. Central Time, it's out there in the world on Meetup. If you find our group, Chicago Queer Sober Social, you are more than welcome to join us from wherever you are in the world. If you need some extra support for the holidays, if you're not doing anything this year, just come hang out with us, see what we're all about, tell your sober queer story to us. Like, we're so here for it. We'll also be doing Queersmas and New Queers Day, which is New Year's Day. Which I'm super excited about. Like, every year for New Year's, like in the past when I tried to be sober, it was like always a day that I would relapse, or just we always be
Hmm.
having a really hard time between the day after Christmas and New Year's Day. Like, that is like the danger zone for me. And I know that I'm not alone in that because I've talked to other
Hmm.
people about that. So setting up myself for success, like how I set myself up for success with you all for the night of the election, I just want to continue to do that because why not? We are here and there's other people out there that need support too. So why not bind together and come together for these these times that might have been difficult in the past, and really just be there for each other as friends and help us get through it. So I'm super excited for the holidays this year because I'll get to be spending it with you all.
Definitely. Queen Jilka from Twitch says, that's cool. I love that idea. And so, yeah, absolutely. Holidays where we can make it work and make it happen, let's do it. Why not? Because there are definitely people out there who might be looking for the same sort of traditional holiday experience, but just maybe without the traditional holiday drinks that might come along with it.
Or the traditional holiday homophobia.
Oh, well, so traditional.
Whatever your story is, you're welcome to join us. And that's the cool part about technology, is that we started off as a group just here out in Chicago, but because of having to go virtual due to the pandemic, we have been able to meet people from all over the United States, from Canada this last week. We have an international base going on. So we are looking for all the sober queers that are out there in the world to come join us on this journey and bound together and come create this amazing community that we have already started, and it's really thriving. So come join us.
Definitely come join us. Like Carly said, you can find stuff like the podcast on all major podcasting platforms. If you want to find the group, you can find us on Meetup. Just search Queer Sober Social. If you want to look at us, if you're like watching this after the fact and you're seeing this somewhere else, like you can definitely find us video streaming on Twitch and YouTube. I'm sure we'll find some other way to exist in some other way. We have our merch store as well, just exclamation point merch in chat, and our bot will be able to tell you where that is. I think that only works for Twitch though. Um, just give it a try, and you'll see what magic we've been able to make happen in like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever.
Uh, and you are all here at the beginning of it, so it's super exciting. And if you want to check us out on Instagram, we're at Chicago Queer Sober
Hmm,
Social right now. So reach out, DM us, email us at queersobersocial@gmail.com if you want to just share anonymous stories that you'd like us to read on the pod. If you have questions that you want us to throw out there on the podcast to the world and get feedback and have us weigh in on, I'm totally down for a Q&A session. So reach out to us. We want to know you. We want to recruit you to our community that is full of queer people. So come on over. You're not alone anymore. So I can't reiterate that enough.
definitely. And if you haven't, you can definitely give us a follow here on Twitch or on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. And also, actually, one way you can actually share your stories, if you want to do something a little bit different, you can go to our Anchor page. So anchor.fm. You might have to search for Queer Sober Social. I'll find the link somewhere or other. And if you are able to go there, you're able to leave us a voice message. So we can play your voice message here on stream live for us to be able to answer. So instead of just, text, which is great, and thank you again for everybody who's in chat. If you want just like, we want to hear your voice, you want to be basically a part of this podcast, the podcast, like, we want to hear your voice as well, because like you guys are just as important as we are, just to make sure that your stories are heard and that we're able to like present this overall experience of being queer and sober to the entire world. And so we're definitely on the lookout for people who would want to share their own stories with us.
Absolutely. And we're so excited to bring guests onto the show. We're so excited to create more content that's going to be happening on this show. And to do that, we'll be here every other Saturday. So be on the lookout for us. And when you do subscribe and get the notification that we're on, come join us, come to the live stream, come keep talking to us in the chat. This has been so much fun. And we are not like the authoritative like assertion on what it is to be sober and queer. We are just people that have come together through these identities that want to break this open to the world and really get it out there to the people that need it. And truly, for me personally, I want to make the podcast that I needed when I first got sober and I had no idea what I was doing. Because if I had a podcast that was talking about this stuff to guide me, whew, it would have been so nice to hear our stories and the stories of the people that we know in our community. So that's why we're here.
Definitely. And certainly, even though we may not be perfect at it, at least it's something that is within the realm of right. And it isn't necessarily pulling people away from kind of being, trying to figure out their own queer identities or trying to figure out how sober they want to be at any given point in time. Um, Everybody's welcome, like we said last time. And like you have to agree to in the Twitch chat rules, if I remember right. Nice. Billy Yum Yum 2x2 says, wash hands, wash hands, wash hands. Definitely. The virus is still out there. Make sure to wash your hands. Make sure to wear a mask. Make sure to thank your mother. I don't know. Like, do nice things to people.
Pandemic is alive. I will also just say, like, systemic racism is still alive. Black lives still continue to matter every single day. Ask yourself what you're doing to work on dismantling racism in your own personal life, in your family, especially coming up with the holidays. I'm sure that's something that we'll touch on. So let's not forget that either. You know, stay diligent. We're here. We're all at home. We're trying to be safe, but you can also be doing really great work on yourself and others that are close to you right now. So
Definitely. I mean, yeah, you don't have to be creating a podcast to like make some sort of message either. Please don't, because we want to like keep the space. But you can actually just like whatever. Like you can talk to your friends. You can try to like at least work on yourself. Like there's a lot of ways that you can try to just improve yourself during these times. Whether that is figuring out like a little bit more about other ethnic identities and just kind of understanding their own stories and their own struggles, and how just different they are from you. Whether appreciating your own ethnic identity, whatever that may be, and better understanding where people are coming from there, or whether that's even just like reaching out and being a little more familiar and comfortable with people who might be outside of your own alphabet of the LGBT plus spectrums. So anywhere and anywhere that you turn and just try to make sure that you're creating those connections, that's always a great way to keep moving forward.
I love that. And I think that right now is the perfect time. Okay, we can't necessarily be in person together, but there's things that you could be doing at home. You can be reading up on new things, reading up on identities that maybe you've been interested in, like trying on for yourself, asking your close friends to maybe use different pronouns for you, try a different name if that's something that you've been always interested in. Like just starting small at home and just seeing like what feels good for you. And I understand too, like if this sounds like we're just giving you a laundry list of stuff to do when you are just like barely making it through the day, like I see you too. Like it's okay. We are in such a strange time right now. There is no handbook of how to make it through a pandemic. So just surviving this and getting through the day and making yourself at least like one or two meals and just nourishing yourself in any way that you can, like that's super important too, because when this is over we're going to need you for the fight that we talked about earlier in this episode, whether that's the politics fight, whether it's the fight to have queer and sober people be visible in the world. We need you. So this is just it, hopefully will be a blip that we can work through together and come out the other side, and there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. We will get through this. And if you do need more support, there's no shame in that. And if you're always welcome to reach out to us if you need help in that area as well.
Just as a reminder, while we're not a recovery group ourselves, we can at least point you to people who do that on a regular basis. And just because we are queer and sober doesn't necessarily mean that that we don't understand the fact that there are avenues to give you some help and give you the help that you might want or might be seeking. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Even though this was like the after show and this is more like the chill, more loosey goosey part of the podcast, which is not actually recorded, except for video. We really, really appreciate you guys just being in chat, for following, for sharing this with your friends, and enemies, I don't care. Like, share with everybody, please. Like, I think I think that this is, like Carly said, this is the podcast that I think more people need. And if you'd like to give us some suggestions, or you want to be a part of this or whatever, reach out in whatever way. Like, there's socials down there, or that way, I don't even know. Like, you can find us if you just search Queer Sober Social. We'll probably pop up pretty quickly. So
Amazing.
that, I think, wraps up the entire stream. Thank you all so much for joining, and we will talk with you guys in a couple of weeks, just after Thanksgiving. So happy Diwali for those who might be celebrating. Happy Thanksgiving, because we won't talk to you before then. And we will catch you later.
Bye. Take care of yourselves. Do something nice for yourself tonight. See you
Bye.
soon.